Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Dark Winds, Season 3, Episode 3. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So immediately picking up in the aftermath of last episode, where really it's kind of a couple hours because it was like dark time, and now it's like daytime, so it's like the next day. And so, obviously, God, what was it? Shorty did not see who knocked him out. And Lee Porn kind of described what he saw. And I even loved, she was like, was it men? Were they dressed up like they this? Were they brown? Were they white? Were they a monster? Because it's like, because Lee Porn is, even though he said like it's real, he's still chalking it up to be like, because you don't want to seem crazy. And he's seeing a lot of stuff, especially this episode. So it's kind of like, I don't want to seem crazy and like I'm off my rocker. So I'm just going to be like, yeah, it was someone in a mask or whatever. Even though it's like, I kind of think I know what I saw, but I don't know for sure if I saw what I thought I saw. So, but they followed their trail and it led them to a farm nearby, which immediately that place gave me the bad vibes because it felt like it's like the moment everyone came out, you're just like, I was like, well, this is the 70s, so I was like, is this supposed to be like a hippie commune or something? It felt like it was supposed to be that. It like felt very cultish too. I was like, yeah, this place definitely seems off. Like no one else is talking. Like only, I mean, you could be like, well, everyone else were extras, but you know, in the context of the show, it's only three people talking. It's mainly what's the guy's name, Halsey, and the woman Suzanne. They're the only ones talking. There's a guy that they arrested because he's the one immediately taking off the moment that he saw Chi and Lee Porn. And you know, and Halsey tried to be like, well, he saw Indian cops show up, and they had the guns drawn, even though they didn't draw their guns until after the fact. You know, they were like, hey, hold on. He just saw them and then ran. So it was like, that was complete and utter BS. But it's like, you could tell there was something off because, Suzanne's trying to be like, oh, the truck is mine. I mean, we all drive it. So that kind of gives you a long list of suspects who could have been seen around the time of Ernesto's like disappearance and stuff. So, and they're kind of like doing a crappy job at coming up with alibis like on the spot because I guess they thought nothing would ever lead directly back to them. So kind of unfortunate in that regard because the trail that they had followed, Lee Porn was looking at it. He was like, they used the river to kind of cover their tracks, so they were probably hoping it wouldn't lead back, but it did. But it's like, yeah, there's definitely something off because Lee Porn could tell, like, Suzanne wants to say something, but she won't say anything while the others are around, specifically while Halsey is around. So you're like, I don't know what that situation, like I said, just gives you that creepy cult vibe to it. So, but Lee Porn doesn't have enough time to just focus on that because some kids ended up finding what they believe to be BJ's body. I saw the bones and everything. It didn't even register in my head that it was BJ Vine's body. It didn't even click, because even though we got the recap at the beginning of the season and everything, I still forgot what he was wearing. So it didn't even correlate in my head when they found the body. I was like, oh, this is just a body. I was almost hoping because one of the kids was Raymond, and I was like, oh, please don't tell me you're going to find your brother's body. That would suck. But it's like, no, it was something else entirely. But yeah, like obviously, Sylvia's like right on top of this, and she kind of brings Lee Porn with her, and he wanted to try and get out of it. Like, no, I'm busy, but she's like, no, they can hold down the fort. So they go to where the body was found, and obviously she's kind of nailing it about the whole situation because she's like, okay, so obviously it's too far in any direction for him to have gotten here on his own. So most likely someone drove him there. And I love Lee Porn trying to be like, oh, it must have been someone he trusted. And she immediately was like, or they could have forced him into the car. And she's like, but what kind of genius psychopath would bring him out here and to kill him, but then not kill him? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that wild? And Lee Porn's like, yeah, you're making a lot of assumptions, but, without any hard evidence or whatever. And she's like, yeah, maybe. It's just like, oh man, it's like, how much do you actually know? Because it's the thing of like, she is like kind of nailing this, so she's really good at her job. But there's also the aspect, I guess you could almost make the argument, maybe it's just because Joe was so sloppy with the whole situation. I mean, he's also riddled with guilt that's manifesting itself in him seeing a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, even during that scene, he's like coughing up an arrowhead, and it's just like that was all in his head. She's obviously, because he tried to say like, right, there's a lot of people in the res who would have had beef with BJ. So it's like, okay, so let's interact. Let's talk to the 6 families that were affected. And then I love Lee Porn being like, all right, well, you can sit down and talk to me and Emma any time. And she's like, oh, You're the one who runs things here. I will talk with the other 5 families. It's like, once again, she's not sly, because even Lee Porn was like, yeah, you can talk to me, because it's like you went out of your way to bring up 6. You're once again, it's like you're twisting the knife, because like you do definitely know when you're playing coy, because the thing is you don't have any proof or evidence. You have your assumptions about it. It's like, how long has she been on Lee Porn? I'm curious about it, because that's the thing. He didn't directly kill BJ, but he indirectly killed him by leaving him out there to basically freeze to death. So, because he would have to have walked any direction. Some places are closer than others, but it still would have been an old man walking for miles to get to like anywhere that he could be okay. So he still is responsible. I mean, it's not as bad as literally pulling the trigger on him like you wanted to, but it's still the thing of, you did leave a man to die. So I mean, that doesn't change. I mean, regardless of it, it still hasn't changed your guilt over the whole thing. But as Emma kind of brings up later on, it's like, well, you kind of invited his spirit into our house, because like it's such an interesting and complicated dilemma, because Emma was over at her in-laws' house, and then it came up on the radio, and it's like, and I thought it was interesting, like Joe's dad was like, oh no, like, well, Emma, if she wants to turn it off, she can. I figured out of anyone she'd want to hear it, but she's like, no, I don't want to. And he's like, oh, but like, I'm perfectly fine with it. That man got what he deserved. He killed my grandson, so that there's some Indian justice that was kind of dished. And immediately, because I brought it up last episode, I was like, I couldn't remember if Emma knew about BJ being responsible for JJ's Joe Jr.'s death, but it's like, well, of course she would, because I was like, it was publicly known, like he was getting arrested and everything. Once again, I'd forgotten a lot of those details, but she confronts Joe about it later on, and while he's being confronted, like, he's seeing all these ants. Like, that's such an interesting thematic, like, thing he keeps seeing. Like, last episode when they were finding the blades, and he was seeing all those, like, ants crawling over the place, even though, like, he had brought some for, like, because it was connected to Raymond wanting to kind of make an anthill, and Joe was helping him out with that. And now it's like those ants are kind of being the symbolic messaging of just kind of like, I guess almost supposed to be symbolic of they're flying towards the trail that they're almost acting as like a trail that leads to him or from him. I don't know if you can necessarily interpret them that way, or or maybe it's supposed to be almost like the ants are leading him down this spiral, like, as he's spiraling out a little bit because of his guilty conscience. But yeah, like, Emma does not stand on the side of Joe, because Joe's like, I did what I had to do. And once again, I don't know if it would make Emma feel any better that he didn't like pull the trigger on, he just left him to die versus actually directly killing him. That probably wouldn't make anything better, because it's like, once again, you still are responsible for his death. And so for Emma, it's like, you allowed, like, you doing what you did brought his spirit into our house, like, and also you stained JJ's memory with blood. Like, that's not how you should have, like, handled it. And even Joe recognizes that's not how he should have handled it. But for him, it's just like, he tries to justify it. It's like, this is the man that killed our son. I was trying to do right by the Danae. Like, my job is to protect this family, protect you, look after you, and also our people. But it's like, you could justify it all you want, but even you, like, no, like, even when he said it the second time, he was like, I did what I had to do. He had lost some of like that strength behind it, because the guilt is there regardless of it all, and it's catching up with him in the form of Sylvia, along with his own guilty conscience. So some other elements, obviously Chi went to go talk to Shorty about, like, oh, like this farm that's like 5 or 6 miles away, the chili farm that the Coty people are at. He was like, was there any connection for George and Ernesto there? And obviously for Shorty, he's like, I don't really know. He's like, there's a lot he didn't know about his boys. Like, for him, it's just like, I try my best to give them the survival skills they need. But he's like, sometimes I would never hurt my kids, but he's like, I'd yell at them, and sometimes the words that would come out of my mouth, I'd stop and recognize these are the same words my father would say. And I thought it was this beautiful moment where Chi is like, you have made mistakes, Shorty, there's no denying that, but you are not your father. And it's like, I think for him, he needed to hear that. And for out of anyone, despite their beef and their issues, it's like, right, because even, it's like, despite, we're putting all that aside because, like, your son is out there in danger, and I see, like, regardless of our situation, I see you love your son and you want what's best for him. But even, Shorty's asking, like, is my boy alive? And he's like, you got to have faith and belief that he is, because you taught him how to survive. So it's up to us to kind of, go out there and find them. So who knows how that's going to play out? Like whether George is out there on his own, right, surviving because he's running away from the people responsible. Because that was the whole thing of, did they take George? No, most likely they thought George was there too, so they went looking for him. I mean, if the chili farm's not that far away, I guess they must know about it, because we find out from Suzanne later on that Ernesto and George would come by the farm and hang out and stuff. For what I guess that was like that cabin might be in like one of their places, and they were wandering around and they came across that farm. Like Suzanne really liked hanging around because it's like, oh, you're like my little brothers, but Halsey did not like them. In fact, he was super pissed at them and they couldn't come back anymore, which is interesting timing because, like, well, we also know they did something and I don't remember what it was. Was it they were horsing around or they got into a fight and the guy leading the dig site kicked them off. So I'm like, I don't know if there was any direct correlation in that capacity. Because Suzanne went out of her way to say, like, Halsey is not a monster, but was kind of hinting that, but he is a man with a temper and things have to be a certain way. So who knows? Let's kind of go away from that a little bit and let's pick up with Bernadette, who is bringing up the whole Budge situation to Ivan. And, he's kind of quick to kind of not be too dismissive, but it's still the thing of him kind of being like, right, things aren't, they're not, they're not what you have to think they are, because I forgot to talk about Bernie got her gun back. I thought that was interesting. Just sitting in her car, I was like, wow, he brought it back, because the whole point is I want to give you the least amount of stuff to look into. Like that's not going to make, I guess you thought that was going to easily shut her up. That's not who Bernie is. Like Bernadette's going to, like, that's just going to make her investigate things even more, because she's like, there's stuff going on here and no one's willing to connect the dots. They're trying to pretend like there are no dots to connect, and I just seem to be the only one who's willing to look into this. Everyone else is just looking away for whatever reason. So I do appreciate her coming out with that BS, to her boss, being like, oh, like, I stopped the vehicle, the truck, for an extended period of time during the way station last episode. Oh, I should go and apologize. And I was like, oh, look at you, just trying to investigate more. And your boss is, just being like, whatever it is, like, he's not really good at his job, because it'd be pretty obvious what she planned to do. Anyone could tell what she was planning to do. But he's like, yeah, you go off and do that. And he tells you to stay for dinner, you stay for dinner. She's like, yes, sir, I'll do it, sir. And it's like, I won't cause you any more problems. He's like, oh, I wish I could believe that. She's like, ha ha ha. I'm like, so that was interesting, because, like, everyone, like I said, anyone else could have seen through her in that capacity. So, her talk with Tom is just like, oh, apologies. And it's like, both her and I think Tom and Budge kind of said the same thing about, like, the whole, like, oh, everyone's just doing their job. You were just doing yours. And it's like, oh, yeah, there are delays that happen sometimes. Don't worry about it. But then it's like, oh, yeah, I met that guy, Budge. I should apologize to him, too. And it's like, huh. It's like, why would you need him to be there? And it's like, oh, we're driving through a whole bunch of roads. Some people aren't that kind and might try and hijack the truck. Oil is pretty damn valuable. So it's not like something that's so easily replaceable. It's like someone steals it and stuff, It's like that's a lot of money you'd be out of and stuff. So she goes around trying to ask questions to one of the people working on the farm, and she says the word pig, and the guy got very, like, cagey, especially when she was like, oh, have you seen a woman and a girl, were they from here, did you see them? But yeah, especially when she mentioned the word pig, he definitely got the most cagey and very, like, skittish. She has, like, her date with Ivan, I don't know why I said Ivan, like, Ivan, and Bud showed up at her place. Like, oh, you were looking for me? And then the whole debate are like, she's like, no, like, get in the car, I'll drive. He's like, no, I'll drive. I insist. She's like, well, he's like, I know the way. And she's like, well, then you just be the navigator. So she gets in the car with him. She is locked and loaded with her gun in her purse, but it's, he knew from the beginning. And I thought it was interesting that the moment they kind of got to, I'm assuming it's supposed to be the border, he kind of waves off the hand and the guy lets him through. And I was like, that's weird. At first I was like, is Budge some kind of, like, is he like a Mexican cop or something like that? That's the vibe I was getting. Because once again, I go back to where I'm like, I thought what she was drawing was a badge, especially because she said the word pig. So once again, pig being the slang term for cops. That's what I thought. But for them to kind of let him through, it could also just be like, well, he's security for Tom. So it's just a thing of Border Patrol knows just to let anyone related to and connected to Tom Spencer to let them through, especially considering Budge is his head of security. So, but they go to a restaurant and have food. And I love that like sneaky conversation between both of them. Once again, the whole thing of, yeah, you're just doing your job. We're all just trying to do our job. He's like, well, what is your job specifically? He's like, there you are asking, there you are doing yours. It's like, yeah, I'm security. She's like, did you take my gun? And he was like, no. She's like, but were you the one that returned it? And he did not answer that. It's like, he was honest. He wasn't the one that took your gun, technically, because he did take your gun off the guy he murdered. So it is interesting. So he wasn't technically lying, but he also made sure not to answer that second question. So yeah, that's definitely fascinating, especially when you take that and you tie it into the final section of the episode where they got a warrant, and so Chi and Leaphorn with some other cops investigate the place. I thought it was real interesting. I was like, the moment the place is quiet, I was like, did they kind of go full? Was it Jonestown? The cult. Ain't that the Kool-Aid cult thing where like all the people drank the Kool-Aid and killed themselves? I think so. That's why I was kind of getting the feeling I'm like, we're gonna find bodies, but like no one was around. So I'm assuming like by the time Suzanne came back, well, they might have already been weary the moment Leaphorn and Chi came there the first time. It's like earlier in the episode, they're like, all right, we got to pack up and leave. But I was also wondering, I was like, or could it be a thing of when Suzanne came back is when they left? Who knows? But when they got there, Leaphorn found her with a needle in her arm. I'm assuming heroin and just overdose. And I was like, that sucks. She was just trying to do the right thing, and that's what happened. Because the only other person there was Halsey, so he definitely had to have done that to her. While they're also like investigating, they found like something fell over, and she looks at the back of it, and it's a whole bunch of pictures of cops. One of them, I didn't pay attention to all the other ones. Obviously, the one they focus on the most is Bernadette. So you're like, okay. As I figured as much, I was like, how are these two stories going to connect? And now I think we see it. So this quote unquote chili farm might be like a drug farm because there were scales around. Even she took like a taste of something and spit it out. So I'm like, and considering the heroin that she overdosed on, I was like, maybe that's what this is. So I'm wondering, maybe the whole Tom Spencer thing isn't 100%. Maybe it's not human trafficking. Maybe it's drugs. So you could probably hide drugs amongst the tanks of oil. Like you could easily do that. But I mean, you'd have to be careful that it wouldn't float to the surface for Bernadette to have noticed when she checked the tanker last episode. But it could also be a thing of, once again, as I said last episode, Bernadette was already around asking questions. So this time when it came to their shipment, because they already knew that she'd be working at the way station, because I'm sure Tom's the one that pushed her boss to put her on that position. All of it's for the purposes of trying to get her to let stuff go. So it's like, oh, when nothing shows up, you'll have less reason to keep investigating. But that's even more reason to investigate because she knows something's up and off. So... But I'm like, yeah, so does this not have to do with human trafficking and it's about drug trafficking? Or is it also about human trafficking? I'm like, what role do they play in it? Like, are the human trafficked people being used as mules for smuggling drugs? That could be a big part of it because we do have all those workers at Tom Spencer's ranch. And then but... I don't know if that mother and child were part of that too, because it didn't seem like there were any kids there. So her having a kid with her, I thought was interesting. But I was kind of debating that last episode. But I'm like, well, the child could have always been leveraged to kind of keep the mother in line. So that might be an angle to that as well. we'll ultimately have to wait to see where all this takes us. Some very interesting, like I said, developments and threads. We'll have to see how it all continues to play out. I think I saw this earlier. I was looking through like episodes and stuff. Like I believe this season is going to be 8 episodes instead of the 6 that the previous 2 have been. But that might be wrong. But I saw somewhere saying 8, so I was like, oh, that's interesting. But yeah, so we're kind of entering the halfway point of the season after next episode. So it's gonna be interesting to see where we end up, what these next developments are going to be, especially between Lee Porn and Emma now that the truth is kind of out, and she'll probably try and cover for him because she's going to be his alibi. And it's like, oh, interesting too, considering like you got all friendly with Sylvia, but then like because she doesn't know that's what Sylvia is here to investigate, but now it's going to be like, oh, were you getting close to me because you were suspicious of my husband? So a lot of that. Maybe you'll get closer to finding out where George is, but that probably won't be revealed until like closer to the end of the season, if he's still alive. If he's dead, we'll probably find out sooner, but if he's alive, we probably won't see him until late in the season, maybe. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to find out more about Halsey and these quote-unquote chili farmers. There's a lot there, so... Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.